Welcome, everybody, to another episode on Genealogy TV. My name is Connie Knox, and today we are talking about Ancestry's new feature. I'm super excited. It's the Networks feature. And here to help me understand how it works is Ann Mitchell. I believe, Ann, you are a product manager. Is that correct? Welcome.
It's great to be here. Thanks for asking me, Connie.
So you are the product manager for the networks at Ancestry, correct?
That is correct. I've been at Ancestry actually for 17 years, and I'm a diehard genealogist. So
Yes, aren't we all? I love it. Love it, love it, love it. All right, so, okay, I could explain it, but you explain for the audience at home what the heck we're talking about with this new networks over there at Ancestry.
we have lots of tree building products trying to establish genetic, connections between people. But often what we find is what users and what we're looking for is just the stories our ancestors have, right? How do you tell those stories? How do you discover those stories? And one of the best ways to do that is not just to look who they're genetically related to, but who did they have other relationships with? Who did they go to church with? Who did they go to school with? Who did they work with? Who did they serve in the military with? So the network tools are really meant, I think this is what Crista, I think she came up with this. It's to discover the dash between birth and death, right? What are all those pieces and stories and information that help really build out who your ancestor was? We all have tools that we hack together to investigate this information, but by bringing them to Ancestry and building these tools out, we think it will make it easier for people to do this and also open it up to people who are not maybe as hardcore as you and I are, but just a little bit less hardcore, and to help them discover some of these fascinating stories and just help them make them feel closer to their ancestors, which is always what we're all after.
So, for those who are new to genealogy, part of what we are talking about is cluster research and or the fan club, friends, associates, and neighbors, family members. And so by having these connections, even I have solved so many problems with
Mhm.
friends that showed up in newspaper articles that I started going, well, wait a minute, how is this guy related to my ancestor? And when we start researching that fan club or that cluster of the community as a whole, we can really, really start getting a sense of what our ancestors went through, cluster migration, chain migration, all of that together. So,
Exactly.
and DNA tools, as you had mentioned. So, just for everybody to have an understanding, this is part of the Pro Tools package, correct?
Currently, while it's in beta, it's part of Pro Tools. These are super active, engaged users. And as we're in beta, we're looking for feedback. What's working? What's not working? What else would people like to see? So that's why we put it in Pro Tools. We will expand it out to other subscriptions once we get it out of beta.
Fabulous. So, what kind of networks are you seeing people create?
You name it, they're creating it. A lot of people are creating, just networks around their family. I think they're trying to look for those break down brick walls, that kind of thing. Definitely the military. We've seen burial places, that family cemetery. Figuring out who all is buried in the family cemetery holds a lot of clues to who a person was and helps you break down brick walls. So we're seeing that. We have a whole contingent of users we've been working with one of our internal people, Nika Sewell Smith, who does a lot of enslaved research. So we've been working with them and we've seen enslaved networks built. And that one is particularly exciting to me because researching the enslaved has often been difficult, but we're also translating records where they're listed as property, which is just, really hard to accept. But we're translating them now and we're trying to create networks where we can establish them as people and discover who they were and who they became after enslavement, if they lived that long, which I just find a fascinating piece of research. And I'm just super excited about because it really opens up that area in ways that I don't think we've seen before.
Fabulous. So, yeah, I've been playing with it. In fact, I was playing with it again this morning. taking a passenger list, we had talked about this a couple of weeks ago, and adding more of these passengers to the network that I had created, because there are surnames that match the surnames of my ancestors, and I'm like,
Right.
these guys, and plus they're standing next to each other in line on the passenger list, they've got to be related. So,
Right? Or at
right?
least
They're-
they know each other, right? They share that experience together, which, what stories do maybe they have that got published that your ancestors didn't have. So all of that informs who your ancestor became.
Now, just for clarification, for those who may are experiencing a video about the networks for the first time,
Right.
these are private networks. Nobody else can see your networks, correct?
That is correct. I'm so glad you asked that question. So we did a lot of user research before we build any big product. We talk to users and try and determine what it is they're after. And what everybody seemed to want was, I want a private workspace where I can sort of figure things out and build this out. Nobody else can see it. We have something called sticky notes, which I'm hoping we can talk about in a little bit, but which is basically notes to yourself. Those are private. They will always be private. Eventually we'll get to the place where people can decide, you know what, I want to share what I've done here. And then you can make that determination to publish it. But it's all under the user control, because that is what everybody wanted. And that's what makes the most sense, we think. So that's the way we went.
So let me ask you this. If I have this passenger list that I've created with a bunch of people, some of them are connected, some of these people are actually in my tree, and others are now kind of floaters in my account, but they're not necessarily connected to the main tree. Do you deliver hints to other members based on my network?
That's a great question. So it depends a little bit on if you have a private or public tree. If you have a private tree, everything that you put into your tree, we don't do anything
Right.
with. And just to back up a second, when you create a network, you put it within a tree space because it's likely to have at least some people in common with people in your tree. You could create a completely new and separate tree and make it maybe private or whatever, and no one would ever see it. But if you're like me, I love having a public tree because people reach out to me and tell me things I didn't know. They tell me mistakes that I've made. People have sent me books and documents and all sorts of things. Having a public tree is a great way to make connections. So when I put a network in a public tree, if I put in people, if they're already in my tree, obviously they're getting hinted. But if we create floating nodes, in other words, or floating people, what that means is they're not genetically connected to anyone in my tree. Then if I'm in a public tree and those people are deceased, then they can be hinted off of, right? We can hint documents that are attached to them. We can hint those people. If they're living, of course, they follow the same rules that all living people in public trees follow, and we don't hint those people. That's a little complicated, but if you think about it, hopefully it makes sense.
Yeah, so if we're adding people to a network, say without a source,
Right.
will that cause the tree checker pro tool to flag a person as having no source and increase our, or maybe decrease our, our
Wait,
tree
who
score?
are you rating? Yeah, that question has come up quite a bit. Currently, yes, it will impact your tree rating. And I know if you're like me, we're always trying to get our tree rating up a little bit. So one of the things we're looking at by the time we get out of beta, we're just going to evaluate how we compute that. If it's a floating node in a network, do we not count it? We're looking back at that. So that's come up quite a bit. So we'll take that into account.
So can I share my screen for a moment? Do you mind?
Oh, I'd love to see what you've been working on.
Can you see that?
Yes, I can. Oh, wow. You've got more networks than the last time I talked to you. What the-
Yes. Well, and here's something I was working on. So Christiane Beck here. She is my Danish second time, two times great grandmother. And down here, I've got her in 3 different networks. I had created a Danish ancestors network, and we had talked about that before. Then I created the passenger list, the geyser, but then I discovered another passenger list that I think she's on from an earlier marriage. So if we go to that network, she was originally married to a guy named Schroeder. So she has kids with Schroeder. And then if we go back to the networks, back to networks, and then we go to the geyser, she is over here as well. And now what I did was I created the entire page because I wanted to see who all was here. And I have to really kind of open this up in order to get to see the whole thing. So here's a suggestion I have for you. I created little emojis on the suffixes just so I could find them in the passenger list, because if I went and did the entire 22 pages of passenger list, it would be too much to find these folks in this. So
Okay.
anyway, these are the other kids that are from the first marriage. So I gave them a related family emoji, and these are my direct line ancestors right here. So as I am looking at this one particular network, here is the passenger list. And I know we had talked about this briefly before about possibly being able to somehow check mark and click on all those people and add them all at the same time. Boy, that would be cool. Just saying.
Yes, it would, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I know. It's a challenge. I get it. But
Well,
anyway,
maybe in time, yeah.
yeah, I just wanted to share that so that the audience at home has an idea of what the heck we're talking about. Because if we go back to the ancestor here, now we can see how many. Hang on, let me get back to her. Here she is in the tree. We go view her profile real quick. We can kind of see how many networks she's in now as we try and go, wait a minute, I know this one's correct. This one I'm still evaluating, but I'm thinking this is her. There's 3 of the kids are lining up kind of within a year or two of the right ages. And then these are all the folks that end up in Wyoming, basically. But
When you question about what you had with the emojis, because I found that an interesting way to maybe break people into groups. So are you trying to, like, you've got a list, say, of 100 people, for example. Are you
mhm.
wanting to group them together? Was that something emoji? I'm just trying to make sure I understand so we can go and, think deep thoughts on all of this. Would that be useful to be able to say, yeah, I just want to
Yeah,
pull up these people, or I just want to pull up these people?
yeah, it would be helpful to be able to go, yeah, these people are in the tree and these people are not, somehow to differentiate. And the reason why I wanted, see, the little green check mark for me is just so that I know I've done a complete and thorough research, including the research notes for each ancestor. So these are my direct line ancestors for the most part.
I'm just
But
taking here because this is useful information. Thank you.
so these guys had that emoji. I noticed earlier when I just did this today, I had to open the network again to get that to show again. So that may be the case here. To get
Okay.
these Schroeder kids are the ones that are with that other emoji that are family members that I know to be family members, but
That makes sense. I mean, and this is, not a huge network so far. It looks like you've got 38 people on it, but already just being able to say this person's in this little group and this person's in this group gives you understanding of what it is you're looking at. And I love what you've done with the emojis. That's an interesting way to visually represent it. Because sometimes just a little visual cue can really help us get a quicker understanding of what we're looking at. So
yeah.
it's a great
And
idea.
I'm really hoping that you can take this source, even if it's people that are not necessarily connected to my family, but to be able to, I don't know, a button here, add this source to everyone in this network.
Right. It's an interesting idea. We have to be careful. When you do that, I mean, just bulk adding a source can be we have to be careful how we approach that. Something like a crew list where it's just a quick merge is okay, but it if there are relationships on there, you want to make sure that you're also capturing that. So, it just takes a little thought on how we make that work for users, but I could see where that would be a useful feature for sure.
Fabulous. Thank you for listening.
Hey,
Um,
but I think that's one of the things on networks. This is such a new implementation of an old idea. Clusters and fan and all that stuff, really old idea, right? But implementing it on the site, if we're not listening to users and sort of watching how people are using them, we can't really build it into a super useful tool. So that's, I mean, Ancestry, we have really good people who help us figure this out. So always ready to listen.
And I'm still figuring it out too. It would be really cool under this to be able to add a My Tree tag from here.
Oh, isn't that interesting? Okay.
Yep, that would be awesome.
Okay. Taking notes.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Will you be able to add a document to someone in your network, like a census record, to someone in a specific network, and it can automatically be added to everyone else in the network? I think we already talked about that
Right.
briefly.
And again, we're thinking through what that all means. So
Yeah. So, and then as we talked about before, the ability to be able to cross pollinate a couple, like a census record with a passenger list, to be able to see who all is in both networks, or to be maybe create a third network from two networks, would be so awesome.
right. I
So,
I that was an interesting idea as well. Yeah, I have a feeling, I mean, as people start to build this, people are saying, "Oh, I want a Venn diagram and I want to be able to combine and split apart and do all these things." And I'm just very intrigued that already people, I mean, the whole idea of right of cluster genealogy is you belong to so many clusters, which defines who you are or who a person was. So people are really digging in and like, oh, I need better tools, which is really exciting and just gives us new places to go.
yeah, so I've built them for census records, passenger lists, people that show up in books like account books. I found a page while I was at RootsTech, as a matter of fact, spending some time in the library there in Salt Lake City. I was able to find an accounting
Okay.
where this guy was just recording deaths of people in his community,
Huh.
and half of that page was related to my family. So to be able to take that document and now, kind of create a little network of those people, I think will be, especially when it comes to the point where other people can, like, I could invite other people to see, or just the general public to see my networks, or get delivered hints based on my
Right.
networks to other people that are related, or even people that are not related to me but are in my fan club,
Right.
right?
Right. Right. You
Yeah.
just never know where you're going to make that connection. So to me, that's just as a perfect use of it. I have, for example, lots of inventories from people who died in like the 1800s in testate. So you have the inventory, and sometimes everybody on that inventory is either a relation or probably a friend. And so being able to document all those people and why were they, buying the inventory of the person who is deceased, that's part of the story, and it will help you build out the fan club, right? So there's just so many different uses, and you never know what document you're going to find that just is like, "Ooh, I got to go figure all these people out." I mean, that's basically what we're looking at. So, yeah,
Well, think about, you could take a will and
exactly.
put everybody that's in that will, whether they're friends and the clerk, the judge who signs off on, I mean, whatever the court document is. I have also, and this is one that I want to do, is there are some guardianship records that I have where some children were orphaned at like 7 and 9 years old, and they end up getting farmed out to another family. So not only do I have the census record, it took me forever to find this 7-year-old boy because he was actually listed as the name of the guardian, not his own real last name. Took me a
Huh.
while to figure all that out, but I found the newspaper articles where his father killed himself and his wife, and then the kids were orphaned and ended up in a guardianship situation. And thanks to Family Search Full Text Search, I was able to find some of those court documents. So that was fabulous. I truly appreciate what you all do as product managers over there, creating these tools and toys for us to play with.
Right. I tell you what, it's a fun job. Being able to create tools and toys, as you say, to help people just get more out of the research, because one is just being able to solve the puzzle, right? Like you said, m- the puzzle of the guardianship and everything. And plus, with the networking, once we can publish it, not only did you solve it, but then you can share that hard work with other people who may not have the skill set when they first start to solve that, but you can share that with them, hopefully to inspire them and then give them the information they need to finish building out their tree. So, and we know the genealogy community is really helpful. So I just see a lot of that interaction going on as well. But I'm so excited to see what people come up with.
Yeah, it's fun. So what didn't I ask?
What didn't you ask? Sticky notes. That
Ah, yes. I haven't really used them that much, but a friend of mine has been using them quite a bit
okay.
for, like, she uses them to attach a URL when needed, which I thought was kind of an interesting
Yeah.
use.
We did make those rich text format, which means you can put in links and you can bold and you can put number lists, all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea, definitely. But often, if you're in a spot where you're like, oh, I got to leave this alone for a little bit and come back, it can help you leave yourself useful notes with status that will help you understand where you are and what to go back to. Also, you can leave yourself notes like, I already determined so and so is not who I thought it was. So, because what it is, you come back 6 months later and you're like, I'm going to go research this person again. And then you're like, oh, yeah, I already figured that out. So, just being able to leave yourself notes, to do list, whatever it is. And these notes are always private. No one else is ever going to be able to see them. So, they can be as messy as you want, whatever. But as genealogists, we're always keeping notes like in notebooks or
Mhm,
or, Post-it notes or whatever it is. And when we talk to users, there are quite a few of them were like, give us a space where we can just
mhm.
record our thoughts and be able to eventually sort them and do those kind of things. So that's why we created those. We'll see how
I
people use them.
I think one of the uses that I didn't really talk about, but I'll throw a picture on the screen, is to be able to take, like, a family group picture. I have one for my in fact, the one I was showing you, my great-grandparents at their 50th wedding anniversary, all the kids got together and sat down and had a picture taken, and then we could create a network of who is in that photograph. I think also is a good use case. I'll get it done by the time I finish editing this, and so that people can understand what I'm talking about.
I think that's such a great example. And, if we're fortunate, we all have photos like that. Or maybe a yearbook photo where you've got, your parent or grandparent who's part of one of these group class photos or part of the football team or whatever, just documenting all those people in the photo. And we have, the recognized ancestor software now that we're developing that also can help, figure out who's who. But it's just a great way, like the 50th anniversary, their friends there are relatives there, just documenting all those people who are part of that event. It just sounds like fun. I wanna go dig into all these things.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I know that you're a tough cookie to get up with, so I do appreciate the effort here. So thank you so much.
I have been delighted to be here and answer your questions. Let me know anytime. It's gonna be a fun product to see how it evolves, so thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.